Hi there, Dr. Nwaogu here, your inspirer, educator, and coach. I want to talk with you a bit about this phenomenon known as imposter syndrome. So, what is imposter syndrome? If I were to sum it up, I would categorize it as fear and self-doubt, dealing with fear and self-doubt. So, imposter syndrome is this persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud. So, if you're dealing with imposter syndrome, you might have this fear of being found out as someone who's incompetent, incapable, undeserving of a particular role or title or any other success factor. So, when you're navigating through this imposter experience, it certainly impacts the way you think about yourself, how you feel, and how you behave in social settings or even behind closed doors. If you're dealing with imposter thoughts, you might think, gosh, I don't deserve to be here. I don't belong. I don't fit in. I don't have the skills that are needed to succeed in this role. All those negative self-limiting beliefs are some of the thoughts that you could have if you're dealing with imposter syndrome. When it comes to how you feel or the emotions behind it, you might feel like isolated. You might feel afraid. You might feel even angry with yourself. You might even be dealing with some sense of hopelessness about your ability to succeed. It might even come with feelings of frustration with yourself and the timeline that you're working with to really hone in on certain skill sets that you really want to excel in. And when you think about imposter behaviors, you might notice yourself shrinking, for example, pulling in different parts of your body to make yourself small because you don't want to be exposed, you don't want to be in the limelight, you don't want to be center stage because of this fear of being found out. Shrinking also comes with this sense of low self-efficacy where you don't believe that you have the skills needed. So with those thoughts of not feeling capable, it comes with the feelings of fear, which then manifest to these behaviors of shrinking. Also, if you're dealing with imposter syndrome, you might notice that you withdraw or avoid certain situations to perhaps advance yourself or to position yourself in a more challenging role because of that fear of failure or because of that fear of being exposed. Now, here's a common one that you might be very familiar with. You might overwork yourself, overworking, staying up long hours at night to perfect a presentation, to perfect a speech, because again, you don't want to be found out as someone who does not know what they're doing. So you're spending time overworking yourself. So the challenge with that is, what about self-care? What about self-preservation and taking care of yourself? Okay, so now you have a general idea of what imposter syndrome is, what it looks like, what it can feel like, and some of the behaviors that are associated with imposter syndrome. Now, I want to share with you some of the reasons why you might be dealing with imposter syndrome. One reason is that you are in a competitive environment where people are trying to one-up each other. And here's another one that's really common: limited experience. You may not have enough exposure in a field to feel totally comfortable in your performance in that particular area. As a result, you then feel like you don't belong or you don't deserve that role because you don't have the experience or the exposure or the skill set yet. Your skill set is quite limited. That's another reason why people feel like imposters. Another challenge is a lack of support. You may not have those supportive structures in place that can encourage you or empower you to take the next steps towards your goal. Another reason you might feel like an imposter is because your environment is exclusive. Your environment doesn't really foster this sense of belonging or inclusivity. And so what that does is it makes you feel like you don't belong, you don't fit in. Now, a huge one is negative self-beliefs. Oftentimes, this traces back to your childhood. Maybe someone said something to you or called you a name or labeled you in a way, and you've carried this notion with you over time and into spaces that require you to perform, and you believe that negative notion about yourself. Another reason you might feel like an imposter is because of this concept called stereotype threat. With every social identity group in society, there's a stereotype attached to that group. So if you feel like you're outnumbered in a group, for example, if you're the only woman in a male-dominated space, you might feel bogged down or pressured by this stereotype about women. Maybe women are not the best leaders, which is false, of course. Women are amazing leaders, if you didn't know. But you might get bogged down about different stereotypes about women, and that could cloud your thoughts and cloud the way you perform effectively because you feel like you don't belong in that space. The stereotypes about women may be something that is a stigma in your mind, and you don't want to show up according to that stereotype. It's oftentimes a factor that makes people feel like an imposter. And last but not least, I will say the ego is another thing that affects how people feel when it comes to imposter syndrome. So ego has to do with your sense of self-importance. And also the ego is where our insecurity lies. Oftentimes people will focus so much on performing well and looking good in front of others because they think that will make them be important or feel important. So when there's so much focus on trying to be important, you'll recognize that you're never going to be perfect. There's always learning and growing to take place that needs to happen. So if we're going to place ourselves in this vicious cycle where we're always chasing like the idea of looking good in front of other people, we're always going to feel insecure. So those are lots of reasons why you could be feeling like an imposter. It could be one thing, it could be a combination of things, but those are certainly some of the reasons. Now, if you're looking for someone to help you and coach you through the process of moving past the imposter syndrome so you can move forward towards your goals, make sure you connect with me. I'd love to be your coach and coach you through that process. Thanks for listening. Take care.